Hello, my name is Rachel Durchie and I will be stamping with you today. I will be posting my projects on my blog, so check those out there. I will have the measurements and the items that I'll be using today. Today I am using the stamp set gift from our garden, from the garden, and I will be teaching you the technique One Sheet Wonder. Tip I'd like to share with you today about One Sheet Wonder is you want to make sure that you are stamping your images as close as you possibly can to each other. This is why I love our clear blocks and clear mount stamps, so that we can see the images as we stamp. Also, when stamping with bold images, you want to make sure that you linger on the paper long enough for the ink to absorb into the paper. I also rotate my stamps as I am stamping. And again, try to make sure that you stamp them as close as possible. You get the idea here. So I will go ahead and move these ink pads so that I don't get my projects in the ink pads. So here is the final piece of cardstock after I have stamped everything. It's an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And I have rotated the stamps and I stamped them as close as possible. Here, so you can see how I've cut up these images, the piece of cardstock, so that you can see each of the cuts. These two pieces here are throwaway pieces. I will not be using them on the projects today. Here is how I cut up my cardstock. I first cut at 5.5, then I cut at 3 3/4 and at 5, and again this is a throwaway piece. I cut at my fourth cut, I cut at 1.5, and again I threw away this piece. Then I cut at 1 3/4, and the last time I cut was at 2. I also cut these pieces as well into smaller pieces. My first project I will be showing you is a box. So here that I fold my piece of cardstock after it's been cut in half. I mark at 2 3/4 at both ends here. I mark that and then I will score the cardstock. So here's the piece of cardstock. You can see the pencil marks here that I have marked at 2 3/4. And so you fold your piece in half, and then from the mark you are going to go from the folded point to your mark 4 times. This is so that when you make a nice triangle box, here I have tied it with the real red ribbon and had punched holes in it. Here is the second project. It is a card. I put this on old olive cardstock with the Pacific Point border, stamped my greeting on Whisper White, and tied pumpkin pie ribbon around my greeting. Here is the third project. Again, I cut up each of these squares. It's 1.5 by 1.5 for a card. This card, I mounted each of those squares onto real red cardstock, stamped the greeting onto the old olive cardstock, and attached my ribbon with a glue dot. Here's my fourth project. I made a topper with this project. What goes well in the garden? Worms. Worms go well in the garden. So I went ahead and put some candied worms into our cellophane bags. I folded the cardstock, the real red cardstock, in half and stapled it, and then put my One Sheet Wonder piece onto that topper, and then added a piece of Pear Pizzazz ribbon. Fifth project here are 3 tags that I made. Again, I cut each of these pieces at 2 by 1 inch. So I was able to make 3 tags. I left room underneath from the garden of so that I could write my name later and give a nice treat or some zucchini from my garden. The sixth and final project is also a card. With this one, I put it onto the Pacific Point cardstock, onto my folded old olive cardstock, and stamped my saying on Whisper White cardstock as well. I also tied the Pear Pizzazz ribbon around my card.